Okay, so this is our first episode. My shop's name is Lone Rider Customs. I'm located out here by Elida, Saskatchewan. Most of the time we're doing windshields and stuff. That's kind of what our main easy making money is. They come in, they go out real quick, we can get paid for them fast. Not too much downtime and shop space taken up by it. I wanted to try and make a few of these YouTube videos about some of the stuff I'm doing here, so this is it. On tonight's episode, we're going to be starting into the interior of dyeing the headliner as well as the sun visors and the sail panels. And we're also going to delve into installing a disc brake conversion kit from Inline Tube. Tonight's project, we're cleaning up the headliner on the 66 Cutlass. As you can see, it's got quite a bit of soot damage from the fire. What we're going to try and do is take some TSP, scrub it out. I've already been working on this front section here. You can kind of see where the steel reinforcements are in behind that have rubbed through and made extra clean spots. Fortunately, I can't seem to get it to come as clean everywhere else, but I don't know if I have to. Here's a spot where I've scrubbed it and I haven't gone back and rinsed it just yet, just to kind of show you the stages. And back here you can see this is where I haven't cleaned it at all yet. So you can see quite a difference in this line here, where it has been scrubbed to where it hasn't been scrubbed, to where it's been scrubbed without rinsing, to where it has been scrubbed and rinsed. So you can see how it's coming along, and it's coming along pretty good. Now all we're using to clean it is some of this TSP and water. So it removes wax, grease, prepares surfaces for painting, cleans garage floors, driveways, aids in restoration of paintbrushes. I'm only doing the top two, don't have to worry about the garage floor, although I don't know if it's exactly cleaned anything, there's still paint on it, but that's okay, I'm not really worried about painting it anyways. Here are the sail panels. As you can see, they're kind of discolored and not the best color. I've already cleaned this one. And here is one sun visor that I've already painted with this Body Pro carpet vinyl and leather paint. Seems to have covered pretty good. I don't see any major imperfections or problems. As you can see, the finish appears to be pretty consistent overall. Now just to show you the difference between the uncleaned sail panel and the cleaned one, this is the one that I haven't scrubbed yet with TSP and water, and here's the one that I have. Now it's hard to really see a whole lot of difference, but you can see that there's a lot more discoloring and stuff where the smoke damage was able to get into the cloth. Now I could replace these, but I wanted to give it a shot to try and dye them black beforehand, considering that I wouldn't have as much to lose and I wouldn't have to spend an extra $400 on headliner and material. As you can see, this is one of the sun visors that was damaged from the smoke. This side it's fairly clean, whereas the other side you can see how much smoke it has in it. I used the TSP before I cleaned and painted this one, and it came out pretty nice. Can't really see any major problems with it. Actually, can't really see any problems with it. I think it'll turn out really nice, just as long as it's durable enough to withstand being used year after year. This sun visor is actually off of a parts car, and as you can see, it's in fairly good shape. It's the right color. If I was keeping the white headliner, I probably would have used these. But I want to change it all to black because the car is black, the interior is red. I don't really think it makes much sense having a white headliner inside of a black car with a red interior. Now just to give a little bit of backstory on this car, I bought it 2 years ago last September. The front of it had been burnt as a result of an engine fire. The car itself had already been mostly restored to about 90% completion before it met its untimely demise as a result of an engine fire that was caused by the carburetor being removed and someone tried to start it without the carb being installed. Thus, a major fire happened. So went and picked up the caliper conversion kit for the Cutlass today. We're going to unbox it, check it out, see what it's all about. We picked it up from Inline Tube and had it shipped up. Now we're going to check it out and see if it's all there and then start installing it. Okay, so first we've got the backing plates coming on top of the box. To be alright. So up little dust shields there. Two of them per box. Look good. Bent. Let's have those to the side. So we have a left and a right. Looks like we do. What we got here? Okay. New wheel bearings, dust caps, bolts, front brake hoses, seals for the hubs, and that looks like about it. These are the backing plates, caliper brackets, left and right. These bolt onto the spindles and then allow the new calipers to be bolted in place. And in this box, oh, heavy, got the calipers. Loaded with pads, single piston calipers. Looks like a fairly standard GM caliper. All nice and painted, so I don't have to worry about rusting. Okay, now we're going to open up this box and see what's inside. Brand new spindles. They'll allow the caliper brackets to be bolted to them. I wonder how similar those are to the stock ones. So I don't know if I want to replace them or if I can use the old ones. I'll just leave them there and use them. Looks like, oh yeah, a little bit different. So I might not be able to. Might have to switch them. But I paid for them, so I guess I might as well use them. And these will be the rotors. New front rotors, complete with inner races and outer races. And the hubs are part of the rotors on these because it's old school. Unlike new stuff where the hub is separate from the rotor and you gotta change out the rotor separately. Now, the last box is the master cylinder. There it is. It is 67 to 69 disc brake master cylinder. Fits GMA body, Chevelle 67 to 69, F body Camaro, Nova Corvette, Impala, factory numbers and bleeders. Looks like it's all nice and painted too. just bare metal. So it should look good for a long time. And what else is in here? Little splitter valve for the front brakes. And adjustable proportioning valve to split it to the rear drums. And we got a new booster. As well as, oh, that's the stuff. Looks like a new pin and bracket for the brake pedal, as well as to route to left and right wheels. Appear to be color coded. We'll see, I guess, if that matters. Not that there's really any instructions that came with this kit, but it's pretty well self-explanatory, I'd imagine. So I got thinking about it. I couldn't remember if I had a second brake pedal or not, because I had a bunch of parts from an Impala that I'd bought. A lot of the stuff interchanges. Went looking for the pedal, couldn't find it. Can't actually remember whether I had one or not. But anyways, came over to the parts car, and good news, it looks like the pedal is still intact. So we're going to pull that out of there. Since the one out of the other setup, the bushings were all melted out. This one's already loose, so it shouldn't take too much to take out. The thing about these is a lot easier if you can remove these brackets to get it out, because otherwise, as you can see, both bolts are angled towards each other and keep it kind of trapped in there. I'm just going to loosen, take this one out, and then there should be enough play. Pull it down. And drop it out like so. There it is. On slightly used but in better condition brake pedal assembly. This parts car is a 1967 F85 sedan. I already took a bunch of stuff off the front. Suspension, control arms, put new bushings and everything. This one's still got a pretty nice rear trunk lid. Rear bumper's in pretty good shape overall. Front cowl, looks like there's some steering parts in there. This old car is pretty rotted out though. Not worth saving. The frame rail also had some pretty bad rot in it too, as you can see out here. Too bad the door had a giant dent in it, because actually it's very rust free. And the roof is also in pretty good shape. So if you're nobody looking for a roof for a 1966 or 67 Cutlass 4-door sedan, I have one, and I would be willing to cut it off and send it to you. Let me know. Okay, so we're going to start by taking the old splitter valve and the old brake lines and just fitting them to where they originally sat, and see how different they are compared to how they're going to sit now. So this would have attached here, sat flat against it. This bracket over here would have attached to the frame right there. As you can see, this is the old brake hose that was burnt off. Not much good. The steel lines are okay because the fire wasn't hot enough to damage them. So this would have routed slightly different, being that it was just a single piston master cylinder, and all it had to run was 4 drum brakes. But since we're converting to disc brakes, we have to have a splitter valve as well as this divider valve to run either side. Okay, so I've got the splitter valve mounted now. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with these rear brakes. Since I have this adjustable proportioning valve, I'm thinking my best bet would be to just mount it attached to the output from the master cylinder and not put it through that splitter valve at all, since it doesn't actually serve a purpose other than to control the rear brakes separate from the front brakes. So I'm installing this adjustable proportioning valve that they sent with the kit. And problem number one that I see with it is these fittings are inverted flare 3/16 fitting. But the proportioning valve is supposed to be mounted in line with your rear brake system, because you don't need as much pressure to run the drum brakes versus the new caliper brakes up front. So what I've found is the front valve on the master cylinder runs a 3/16 line, which would work fine as far as running this proportioning valve, but you're not supposed to run it for the front brakes. It's supposed to operate the rear brakes. Now the rear brakes are 1/4 inch line, and this goes back here to the splitter valve that runs out to the rear, where it goes down to the rear brakes and runs the rear drums. Whereas this 3/16 line runs down to this front splitter and splits it from your left and right brake line. So now I'm trying to find online what I'm supposed to do with this proportioning valve that's supposed to mount in line with the rear brakes. And yet it's 3/16 fittings on a 1/4 inch line. So either I'm going to have to find some adapter fittings to change it to 1/4 inch, or I'm going to have to figure out with the company why they did this to me. So I decided what I'm going to do for now is just keep plugging away with the system as it is, put it into the splitter box, and then up here I'll find the correct conversion fittings and change it to 1/4 inch and run it through that proportioning valve, and then run it to the rear drums, where then I can adjust them individually from the front discs. So now I've got to break these fittings away from these old brake line and out of this old splitter block so that I can clean this line up here and reuse it. So I'm getting these brake lines ready to install, and this fitting right here doesn't want to move. So usually in that case what I'll do is I'll put the line in a vise, and you can either try and work it back and forth real slowly, and sometimes it breaks loose, but usually you got to take a little bit of heat. So I've got this little propane torch here. Put that on there, warm that fitting up a little bit, break up the rust and everything else that's inside there. And it also helps to expand that fitting a little bit and allow it to break loose. Without damaging the line or the fitting. That's a little bit of a glow to it now, so that should be enough. It's warm. So we'll just take our wrench here now and just work it back and forth real gentle until it breaks loose on the fitting. As you can see now, it's starting to move. A little bit more, a little bit more. So we can go all the way around. There. And now it's loose again. So now, of course, we still need this bracket to mount our new brake hose into, and that's a pretty simple procedure. We'll just need to clamp it into the vise, pop this little clip off here, and then we'll be able to remove that old hose. and we can take and clean up this bracket and get it ready for paint. Now to remove this little clip, all you need to do is grab it with a pair of pliers, gently work it out of there, and then the hose should just pop right out, and you're left with the bracket. Most of the parts I usually clean up with a wire wheel on a bench grinder. Works pretty good. If they're the bigger parts, I usually take them over to the little sandblasting cabinet and clean them up that way. For this one, I'll probably just use the wire wheel. Should be able to get most of it cleaned up. So the wire wheel got it mostly cleaned up. You can see here in a couple little crevices, it's still a little bit rusty. Some old paint still on there. So I'm going to take and throw them in the sandblaster and finish cleaning them up. But for mock-up purposes right now, this will be alright. I'll blast them and paint them after I've got everything fitting. Okay, so we got the first brake line kind of sort of mounted and lined up and bent to the right position. So I'll get the first brake hose and hook it in there. There we go, we've got it threaded on, a few threads. I don't know if it's clocked in quite the right position. Won't know that until the calipers are installed. So I'll just leave it like that for now before I put the clip in place. Okay, brake line number 2 cleaned up and partially routed. Brake hose number 2 in position. There's a couple little clips that go onto this brake line when I'm finished. Should be pretty close to where they need to be. Can make a few adjustments and mount those clips before I take them all off and paint them. Now to move on to getting the calipers installed, which means taking the tire off and undoing the spindles, which is going to be a pain because I already did that once when I installed them before I decided to do the disc brake conversion. And that also involves removing, well, holding the frame down because there's no weight for the engine, as well as having to undo these upper and lower ball joints. And that's a pain. But we'll do it because that's what we got to do. Okay, quick little bit video here before my phone dies. To lift this up without the engine or the front fenders, the windshield, or any of those heavy components that are usually installed, because I can't lift this up without there being some sort of weight here, otherwise the whole car lifts, because these aren't an exactly heavy car. So what I'm able to do is I put a bunch of ballast, I guess you could say. I've got 2 cylinder heads in this tote, as well as 3 truck batteries, and this big old air compressor motor sitting up on top. And I'm using that as ballast to try and help add some extra weight to the front of the car. And this allows me to compress this spring ever so slightly that I'm able to remove this spindle without having the whole spring all come apart on me and having to fight to compress everything to get it apart and back together. Okay, we're going to do a quick demonstrational video about how to hand pack wheel bearings. Now, you can go out and you can buy a wheel bearing packer tool. Not sure what they're worth. I've never bought one. I've always done it the old-fashioned way, by hand. So, the way to do that is you start off, you take your left hand, that's this one right here, and you take a bit of grease out of your grease tube, put it on your palm of your hand, right there. It ain't gonna hurt you, it's just grease. California might give you cancer, but we're not in California, so we don't have to worry about that. So, I guess if you wanted to, you could do this with gloves on too, if you're a pansy or, you know, your regular YouTube mechanic, whatever. This is how I've done it for years and years and years. You just pack it in, keep pulling it in like this. See this? It's like you're kind of just scraping it off a little bit at a time. Pulling it through the bearings, hand packing, keep pulling through until you'll start to notice inside here there starts to get to be grease coming through on the inside of the bearing. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. It keeps going blurry. Come on, where are you? Maybe. Let's try and zoom, focus. Focus, there we go. Okay, so you can start to see here the grease is starting to come through. I'm going to keep packing it just like that until each and every bearing has lots of grease in it. This is going to make sure that that bearing doesn't run dry when you first take your car out on the road. See that nice grease starting to come through? Might need a bit more. Let's pull it out of there, put it back in the palm, grab a little bit more, pull that grease through too. You can't just wipe the outer bearing, hope that it's going to hold together. You've got to pull the grease through. That's the only way to do this and have it be successful. And it's not quick. It takes time. Anything that's worth doing takes time. It's just how it is. See? And we got grease packed all the way through the bearing, inside and out. This bearing is hard to turn. Lots of grease in there. Exactly how you want it to be. Now you see I got lots of extra grease. I got another one here to do. I'll probably record it just because I don't want to touch my phone right now. My fingers are too greasy. Break into the package. There we go. Easier to break into the package before you start the project. So anyway, here we go. Do it again. Pull the grease through, all the way through. Make sure that those bearings are well lubricated. Look at that, look how clean my hand is even coming. All that nice grease we're pulling through there. No problem at all. Like I said, we're not in California. I don't have to worry about catching cancer from it. I know lots of old mechanics in their 80s and 90s that have never died of having a little bit of axle grease on their hands. Wheel bearing grease, axle grease, all the same thing. Will not kill you. Wear gloves if you want, if you're really worried about it. Obviously don't take my advice and say, oh, he told me I didn't have to wear gloves and now I have cancer, I'm going to sue his ass. If you're worried about it, wear gloves. Use all your proper PPE. Don't listen to me. This is just how I do it. Grease coming through there. See that? Starting to squeeze right through. Squeezing right out. I'm going to keep squeezing until it comes out so you can see on the camera. Look at that. Coming through there. Beauty. Look at that. Didn't touch that. I didn't put that grease here. That pulled through on its own. All the way around. Same thing. Nice quality. Packed wheel bearing. Now they're ready to go back onto the hubs. Alrighty. Back at her again here. We're going to crack the old Bud Light. It's getting damn warm in the shop. Good. Oh yeah. Okay. So, setting up the wheel bearings. After you get your seal installed, sorry I didn't video that. Anybody that's doing this should know how to install a seal into a hub. If you don't, I'm sure there's videos out there showing you how. Anyway, put it in there, put your wheel bearings back together, throw a bit of grease down inside of your hub cavity. That's going to make sure that once the wheel bearings get warm, you got enough grease, it's going to pass through, move around, keep everything lubricated. Okay, so what you got to do, turn down this nut. You've got your locking washer in place there. Turn your nut down until it's pretty snug. Turn the hub a couple times, That's going to make sure that your races are seated. If you didn't, make sure they were seated beforehand. Turn a little bit more, turn it again. Back off the nut ever so slightly till it's loose, and then bring it back up to where it just feel it touch. Okay? Now, you're going to see on the side here, your cotter pin is going to be able to pass through. Now, you should be able to just hand tighten it, right? You don't want a whole bunch of tension on there, because what's going to happen is you have too much tension on here, you're going to wear those wheel bearings out right away, you're going to wear the races out, you're going to have to take it all back apart again and replace them. And generally a set of wheel bearings, you're looking at least, you know, 30, 40 bucks. You don't want to have to do that if you don't have to. Okay, sliding the cotter pin in, like I said, just the right tension. You don't need too much, too little, right? Slide it in there. Should go through fairly easily, as long as the holes are right size. It's not some Chinese made of crap or something. Tap that in with a hammer or a wrench, or a hammer wrench, whatever's nearby. Sometimes that's what you gotta use. Alright, now you flip over your cotter pin. See that? It's kind of tight at the end. Okay, flip your cotter pin over 2, pull it up and around, take your hammer, tap that in so it's nice and flush, not going to rub on your dust cap and go squeak, 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 squeak down the road, because that would be very annoying. Alright, so what I do for dust caps, when I install them without beating them all up, I got a socket that fits just right over top. I got a full selection of these big 3/4 inch sockets from Ultra Pro. Give me money, Ultra Pro. Okay, put them on there. How am I going to do this without dropping my phone? Can you see? Can you see what I'm doing? Okay, take your hammer, little tap, tap. It's in there. Look at that. Seated, not all beat up. Give it a spin. The cotter pin doesn't click inside there. Good to go. Alrighty, also this caliper on there with these brand new brake pads and pins and sliders, bushing, seals, everything. Banjo bolt. You need. Oh wait, hold on a second. I still gotta clean all the grease off, shipping material off of this rotor. No big deal. Use a little bit of brake clean. Give her a quick little shot. You don't need a whole bunch. Just enough to wet it down. And clean all of that shipping material off this side. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Here, let's set this up so I can video doing that. Just a little bit of brake clean. Spin that a couple times. Make sure we got all the oil off, because that's really going to stick once you get those calipers on. Try and use them first couple times. All that oil is going to burn off and make a big smoke and stink. And don't need that. Alright, so now we're going to slide the caliper on here. We got the pins out. We're going to slide it in place, get it lined up with the threaded holes in the bracket. And we're going to slide these new pins in. They don't need any extra lube. Lube's already on those brackets, or sorry, the bushings in there with the seals. Thread them in a couple threads. Get them started. There we go. Grab your 3/8 hex socket and crank them down. And of course I've got nowhere to put my phone again. Well, I'll just set her down here and do it. Now, when I put the first caliper on, I noticed as I was turning it in that I accidentally pushed one of the little seals out of the caliper. So I had to back up and do it again. Just take a little bit more time, make sure that it's going in straight, not pushing that seal out. And When you push that seal out, the brake caliper is going to rattle, it's going to make a bunch of noise. It's not going to be a very cool install if that's the case. Okay, so tighten them down, get them good and tight, snug, a couple whack whack, they're tight, they're not going anywhere. Okay, next thing's next. I'm going to loosen off this banjo bolt. Run that into the fitting on the brake line. That. Run the other side of the brass washer in place. Brass washer in place. And then slide it down into position. Right. Oops, where are we at? Here. Lock that in place. A couple little grooves in the caliper. Keep everything fitting properly. Turns. Get your brake line aligned right. Everything should be sitting nice and loose, not tensed up or twisted up. Tighten that bolt down a little bit by hand first. You can grab the right size wrench and tighten it down the rest of the way. There we go, tightened down. If you're wondering, there's a 5/8 wrench needed to tighten that fitting down. The banjo bolt, the 3/16 line fittings are 3/8. The 1/4 inch are anywhere from 7/16 all the way up to 9/16 on the master cylinder, as well as 9/16 nuts that attach the master cylinder to the booster, and 9/16 nuts that attach the booster to the firewall. The large nut that attaches the top of the spindle to the caliper bracket is a 15/16, and the bolts that run through the steering into the backing plate and the caliper bracket are 3/4 inch wrench required for those. As well, the upper ball joint nut requires 3/4, and the lower one, I believe, is 15/16. Okay, so a few days, a few phone calls, a few emails later, and we now finally have the parts to put this back together. So what I ended up getting was a couple adapter fittings, because that's what Inline Tube actually recommended. They are 1/4 inch brake tubing to 3/16 adapters is what they basically are. And they look like this. They are 3/16 male, 1/4 inch female. So the description, this is actually a Dorman part number, 785434, 1/4 inch, 7/16 by 20 thread, female tube, 3/16, male tube, brake line adapter, inverted flare. Now, Inline Tube, I'll be fair, they decided to send me the proper fittings, but I already had these ones ordered. They're still sending me them. I'll just put them in my parts bin for next time I need them. Would have been nice if they were actually included in the kit, because they did send 1/4 inch brake line for the rear circuit, and they also have 1/4 inch at this rear splitter, so they had to have known that it was 1/4 inch coming out of this proportioning valve, because that's generally what rear drum brake systems use. I don't know why they wouldn't, but they didn't. So we're here. I've got the proper fittings now. We're going to tighten them in and install them in place. I'm going to leave this elbow, because inside here all this does is go down and back. It has nothing actually to do with this front splitter. So I'll just probably leave this open and not put anything in it, as to try and eliminate extra connections that aren't needed. The less connections there are, the less chance there's going to be a leak, is my opinion. Okay, so I've installed the valve, kind of how I was thinking, but I don't really like how it looks. I would like to do something a little bit better, possibly mount it up over here on the side of this line. But until I have the fenders and everything else in it and fitting back together, I'm not going to know how much clearance I'm going to have. Even for these brake lines, I don't know. As it is, they might hit the suspension, so I might have to make some more adjustments there too. So until then, I'm not actually going to bench bleed the master cylinder or the brake system, because we won't know for sure how much adjusting I'm going to have to do until everything else is mounted back in place, including engine, inner fenders, and the weight of the engine is going to adjust. It's going to, sorry, not adjust, but it's going to change where the upper control arms are sitting. So I might have to just leave it as it is for now and do a follow-up video on bleeding later. Okay, so this will conclude the initial video for the disc brake conversion kit from Inline Tube for this 66 Cutlass. I would also like to point out that when they say 14-inch wheels cannot work with it, they're not kidding. It will actually rub ever so slightly on that brake caliper mount. Not a big deal. I've got 15s lined up for it, so that's what I'm going to be putting on. And otherwise, the kit went together pretty good. There's a few things, like I said, I'm going to have to probably do some adjusting. I'm probably going to put this 1/4-inch line into this block and run it down, and then move this proportioning valve up here onto the side of the master cylinder and try to mount it with some kind of probably a steel mount of some kind. But I'll probably do that when I do the follow-up video of how to bench bleed a master cylinder as well as bleed the brakes on all 4 corners. Make sure to share this video, as well as make sure you tell anybody that's looking at Inline Tube for disc brake conversion kits that these systems are pretty decent. They're very nicely laid out. There aren't a whole lot of instructions with them. There's a few things. It's pretty basic stuff for the most part. If you know how to work on brakes, you're not going to have a lot of trouble with it. Take your time and just take your time, really. There isn't really that much more that you have to do. Most of it bolts together pretty easily. Make sure, like I showed you in the video, grease the bearings properly, pack the bearings in. They're going to last a long time that way. Make sure that you clean your rotor surfaces, get all that oily shipping materials off of it. And yeah, subscribe. Thanks for watching.